We go. I love that voice. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Ann Katz. I'm director of Create Wisconsin, formerly Arts Wisconsin. We're right now in the midst of changing our name. We're the state's community cultural development organization, and one of our programs is Creative Wisconsin Month. So it's the month of April. We stuff as many different kinds of sessions and presentations and all sorts of interesting things into the month as possible, and then we keep going after that. But this is Creative Wisconsin Month, and one of our most favorite presentations of the month right now is Randy Cohen from Americans for the Arts. I am going to turn this over to George Sugros from the Wisconsin Arts Board, because we are co-hosting this presentation with the Arts Board. And George will say hello and introduce Randy, and then we're just going to let Randy go and have a great time. So thank you all for being here. George, thanks for co-hosting, and take it away.
Thank you, Ann. Always a pleasure to co-host, and just always a pleasure to have Randy in the house, wherever that house may be. And welcome to everyone, whether it's good morning to you or in that asynchronous audience world, evening, afternoon, whatever it might be. We're happy to have you with us. And as I say, we're really happy to have Randy with us. I'm going to put his official bio in the chat. In fact, I'll do that right now. But as you know, the Wisconsin Arts Board is the state arts agency, and we are, as is Arts Wisconsin, now Create Wisconsin, longtime colleagues and friends with not only Americans for the Arts, but with Randy. You know, I was thinking today, how would I best sum this up? And I would say, you know, we've been bashing on Zoom probably since the pandemic began, but I'll tell you this, the pandemic would have been hard to swallow without Zoom, because we would not have been able to connect with friends like Randy across the nation, not only for their great insights to the field that we work in, but just to continue our friendships across the internet when we couldn't be in person together. So Randy is the great research guru of Americans for the Arts. He's their senior, I call him senior because I'm a senior at this point. He's the vice president of research for Americans for the Arts, and really brings us numbers that we can use and the 10 things we want to advocate about each year in the arts. So Randy, so glad to have you with us. So glad that Create Wisconsin and the Arts Board could bring you together with our constituents, and take it away.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ann. I wish I was there in town with you, but it's good to be in the house, literally in the house, you know, for me. So still dividing up, you know, work a little bit in the office and at home as well. So it's good to be with everyone and talking today about the creative economy, and congratulations on becoming Create Wisconsin. The organization is just over the years, and really we have decades and decades together, and so you've just always been at the very leading edge of where we need to go to advance the arts in our states and in our communities, and thinking about how they're received by the authorizers in our environment, whether it's legislators or business leaders. And arts and creative economy, you know, that is that's where we're evolving to. So thank you for being a vanguard. And George, one of the great state arts agencies. I was just talking with Tori Allen at lunch yesterday, and you know, and about the region and who do I love working with. It was like easy. Always start with Wisconsin Arts Board and a great team there. So, so today we're going to talk about. Actually, I'll get to the sharing of the screen here, and the presentation will be shared after I'm done with it, so that'll be available. And then, you know, Anna, George, keep an eye on the chat or something. If I turn a corner too quick or something like that, it's like, whoa, hold everything. Happy to Happy to address those questions, but we'll also have time at the end for some Q&A too. So, so here we are, Research Matters, advocating for a more creative Wisconsin. So we're going to talk about the research, creative economy research that you use to make the case, as well as just a little bit about advocating itself, because it's always just a good refresher. And there we are, Create Wisconsin. First time I've typed that, fabulous, and Wisconsin Arts Board. So let's start, click here, with a World War II tank. Since we're talking about creativity and innovation, it's like, what, really? Is that where we're starting? Well, that actually is from the World War II era. But it's not really a tank. It looks like a tank. It is, in fact, an inflatable tank. And I've got it right next to a picture here of an inflatable airplane. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, this work was from World War II. And if you sort of put yourself back into the war in Europe, it was very touch and go. And the US military was trying to get every edge that they could. And so they thought, if we were able to create some battlefield diversions to confuse and confound the enemy a little bit, well, that would help. And so what did they do? We're going to need creative people for this. They went back to the States and they got artists out of the art schools, and they brought in actors and designers and technicians. And they were part of the 23rd Special Troops Unit, and they were nicknamed the Ghost Army. And they did 20 elaborate battlefield diversions. And so, like, for example, one of them is, they created thousands of these inflatable tanks. And then they went to Fort Knox and they recorded a lot of tank and military movement and all that type of thing. And then they brought that back to Europe and they played it on these huge speakers. And so people doing aerial surveillance saw, oh my gosh, there's all these tanks down there. And then folks on the ground miles away could hear like the rumbling of these tanks. And they thought, boy, something's going on over there. And one of the US generals credits the Ghost Army with saving 10,000 American lives during one of the Rhine War battles, because it peeled off this huge portion of the German army that went to chase down the inflatable tanks. And there were all kinds of other fascinating things that were done as well. They had actors dressed as military officers go to dining establishments, bars known to be frequented by spies, and maybe just talk like they've had a little too much to drink and a little too loud about, boy, when Patton goes south, there's going to be trouble. Meanwhile, knowing that everyone in the background is like, ooh, Patton making his move. So there was all that feeding false information. And just this past year, Congress actually honored the 23rd Special Troops Unit with a Congressional Gold Medal. Many of our artists from that World War II era generation were part of the Ghost Army. Art Kane, Ellsworth Kelly, Bill Blass, the fashion designer, all part of this. Now, my point with this is, not that I want to be a history teacher someday, but if we can take arts and creativity and drop that into the middle of a World War II battlefield and innovate and achieve our goals, boy, we sure can do it in our communities today here, in the 21st century. So creativity, innovation, it's just core to what we do and have succeeded for a long time. So let's dive, into some of the interesting data. Every couple of years, Americans for the Arts, we do the largest national public opinion survey about the arts that there is. And one of the questions is, we ask people who engage and participate in the arts, the personal benefits they get. And we give them a long list, it inspires me, reminds me of a time and a place, it beautifies. And the first time through the list, I only let them pick one thing. When you look through the list, it's like, oh yeah, of course the arts do all of that stuff. But what's that one thing? The number one benefit, personal benefit people pick, it makes me feel creative. And then in fact, then you let people pick all the ones. So I'm not that mean, but 64% of the American public says, when I participate in the arts, I feel more creative. There's something central to our humanity about creativity. And it even shows up in the data. So there's a personal aspect to this, but we're also going to get to some of the business and economic aspects of this. And let's start with research done by the US Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's at the Department of Commerce, the top economics shop on the planet. And they work together with the National Endowment for the Arts every year to do the Arts and Cultural Productions Satellite Account. And Department of Commerce picked this up because it's a recognition that arts drives creativity. Creativity fuels innovation, and innovation is how you prosper in the global marketplace. And so what they've done over the years is basically taken, it's commercial, it's nonprofit, it's individual artists, it's import, export, all the arts dollars, it's your university drama and dance departments. And they basically pull all of that out of the economy. And what they found in 2020, arts and culture is an $867.7 billion industry. That is billion with a B. 4.2% of the nation's economy. That's a bigger share of, that should be 4.2% of GDP. That's a bigger share of the nation's economy than agriculture, transportation, tourism. It's a huge industry, and it supports 4.6 million jobs. There's been a lot of great, so just the numbers themselves are huge. And they've been doing this study about 10 years now, and they've pretty much seen an increase over the years. There was a drop about 6% between 2019 and 2020, right? We're in the first year of the pandemic now. So, you'd expect that. It went from about 930 billion down to, as you can see there, about $868 billion. But overall, this, has been a growth industry over the years. But there's been some other fascinating characteristics that the data reveal. And that is the arts actually accelerate economic recovery. If you look at the Great Recession, if you look at variations in the economy, when we invest in the arts, those economies and the arts grow, those economies are growing faster. And in fact, a growth in arts job has a causal relationship into a growth in all jobs statewide and at the local level. I'll say that again. When you increase arts jobs, you can connect that to an increase in all statewide employment. So it's not just like, oh, wow, that's interesting, that those things seem to be happening independently. There actually is a connected relationship there. There's also the Department of Agriculture does research now on the economy in rural communities. And what they find is in rural communities, the higher the number of performing arts organizations there are, and I think there's like a minimum of 4, and then it goes up from there, the more creative economy businesses are found in those rural communities. So we got links to all this research, that we'll share to you so you can read more. But arts really stimulate the economy, by their very presence, but also help grow the overall economy nationally and statewide. So statewide, the great thing is about the last 5 or 6 years, BEA has been doing state versions of these studies. And so let's look at what's happening right there in Wisconsin. 2020 is the year we're looking at. Arts and culture, a $9.9 billion industry, 2.8% of the gross state product. So 2.8% of the state's economy. That is supporting 83,166 jobs. Now, we talk a lot about jobs, 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 jobs. Ask any legislator what your three priorities are, and they'll tell you jobs, jobs, and jobs. And so if that's what's important to them, and decision makers, well, we're going to connect, arts and creative economy to their priorities. And so that's why we've always got these jobs measures. Now, how does arts and culture, arts and the creative economy in Wisconsin stack up to other industries? Well, you could see here, the red line, that's the 9 point. Oh, you know what? I did a little typo up above. Sorry about that. I will correct that before I send this around. I typed $9.9 billion. It should be $9.6 billion. $9.6 billion is bigger than transportation. It's bigger than the utility industry across the state, bigger than agriculture, education, mining. So arts are a bigger industry than most people expect. And, the federal government research shows that they're actually bigger than these other industries across the state. And look at the public investment that goes in to transportation or agriculture or education or mining. So what this says is that when we invest in the arts, we're investing in an industry that can help grow the entire state's economy. So that's a really powerful research study that comes out every year. Again, this was for 2020, so there's a 2-year lag on that. And next year we'll see what happens with the second year of the pandemic. I imagine we'll see maybe a bit of a decrease again. But some people say, "Oh gosh, can we still talk about the economy if there arts in the economy if there's been a decrease?" Absolutely, because what this shows is that even in a down economy, even in a struggling economy, even an economy affected by a pandemic, arts are an industry that supports jobs, as you're going to see, generates government revenue and drives tourism. So there's still a powerful story to be told here. So don't be worried that that the numbers went down, and they did go down a little bit across Wisconsin as well. All right, let's talk about another Wisconsin-based study. And for a number of years, Wisconsin and a number of the communities within it have been part of Americans for the Arts, Arts and Economic Prosperity Studies. And this is an economic impact study of nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences. And what this is shows that the arts organizations themselves are businesses, but this is the only study that really takes the value-added look at that event-related spending. Dinner and a show, right? They go hand in hand. And so when we go to an arts event, we do more than just go to the event itself usually, right? We have all these other activities we do. So people could drop in the chat. I'm always curious who took up like a new arts and crafts, during the pandemic. And I tried a couple things, but what I did, which I've always wanted to try, was knitting. And so I've become a knitter. Not really a good one. I got to totally stare at stuff. I mean, I know people can like knit and watch TV the whole time. That is not me. And what I knit are like the world's longest scarves, just sort of back and forth. Nothing really fancy. There's a bunch of giraffes in the front yard because like I'm the only one that makes scarves long enough to wrap around all their their entire neck. But it's a lot of fun. I've really found some joy in it, and so that's gotten me interested in the textiles and everything. And so actually, my wife and I went and saw an exhibit recently that it's knitting and fiber crafts and that kind of thing, and it's been a new area of interest. But did we just go to the museum and then turn around and come straight home? No, we went downtown, we paid for parking, we had a really nice lunch, spent about $70. It was a nice place, and one of those farm to fork places, so everything's grown within 50 miles. And, and so that was really lovely. And then went to the, the museum and got there and got our little program and kind of read all about the artists and about the artwork and what the, how they do their work and everything like that. And it was really a lovely way to spend an afternoon together. But think about just the economic impact of, that emerged from Randy's new little hobby here of knitting. And, we went downtown and we bought our tickets in advance, right? So we went online, found the day, the time, punch in the credit card. So, we haven't even left the door, and people who do the e-commerce and the finance, are already seeing a little bit of the benefit of this economic activity. And then we drove downtown, parked, it was a weekend. It's probably good for those parking garages. They're all full during the workday, but not so much during the weekend. So I'm sure this museum has really enabled those kind of businesses to thrive. And then a lovely lunch. Some of that $70, right, we spent. That's going to those local growers and producers, the waiter who waited on us, and the owner of the restaurant. Everybody is seeing some of those $70 go around. And then, we went into the museum, and you ever know when you go to an arts event, and I'm just looking at the people we've got here, and from the different organizations, we produce so much paper for everybody who visits us, there's programs and flyers and everything. And, but, we pay a writer to write that content, a graphic artist to design it. And then there's a printer in town. Printers make bank on the arts, printing all our stuff, and even a trucking company that delivers it. So even that piece touches all the rest of the community. And then we go in, and our admission fee is paying for everything surrounded the museum. And so, those are the type of things we try to capture in these economic impact studies of nonprofit arts and culture organizations. So what do we find out? Now, this is, we published this in 2017, and we're actually all in the process now of updating this study. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But, as of a handful of years ago, nonprofit arts and culture across the state of Wisconsin, $656.9 million in economic activity. And on the left there, you can see 376.9 of that's spending by the arts organizations themselves. That's a myth buster for a lot of folks. We love the arts, they improve the quality of our communities, but the fact is they're businesses. They employ people locally. They purchase goods and services from other businesses. We're members of the Chamber of Commerce. We drive tourism. Arts Board is in the Department of Tourism, and so they do so much economically for our communities. And then there's this balance, that's the event-related spending by arts audiences, just about $280 million approximately. So what's the economic impact of that? Well, remember we talked about jobs, 26,695 jobs supported across the communities and across the state. Those aren't just jobs at arts organizations. And what's also important to remind folks is that even the, a cultural facility itself, it's more, that was more than just curators at the museum and everything. You got plumbers and electricians, and we all employ auditors and accountants. And then there's the hospitality stuff. And we went and had our nice lunch. There's all the industries that are supported with that. So the arts supports jobs across the community. Bottom line, art's not just food for the soul, but putting food on the table for almost 27,000 people across the state of Wisconsin. Government revenue is another thing we look at, $75.2 million. This shows that support for the arts doesn't disappear into some black hole of goodness. It gives back to the community, jobs, but also revenue that the government needs to pay for other vital services across the communities and across the state. Nationally, back in 2017, total government outlay, federal, state, local, for the arts was, maybe about $5 billion. Total government revenue at all three of those levels, $27.5 billion. Bottom line is small investment, big returns. That's the arts. All right, so millions, billions, let's drill down a little bit about how the arts are touching all these other industries. And we did thousands of intercept surveys, audience surveys, working with the communities and across the state, asking people like me, how much did you spend at this museum, Randy? The typical attendee spent $37.26 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. And you can see about, half on food and, souvenirs, ground transportation. There's my parking. I didn't have any lodging, but interestingly, well, I'll give you a fascinating lodging number. And then my favorite other all time came from Wisconsin. And that was from a farmer who paid somebody $60 to milk his cows so he could go to the theater that night. Isn't that great? I've told that story across this country, I bet 1,000 times. So thank you, arts attendees in Wisconsin. We also asked folks for their zip code because we want to find out, do you live, in this case, in the state, or are you from outside the state? 15% of the arts attendees came from outside the state of Wisconsin. And then look how their difference in spending is, $78 per person per event. Now, we asked those non-local attendees a question, which was quite simply, why are you here? You're here on business, you're here visiting friends and family. 59% said, we came to Wisconsin specifically to attend this arts event. So you can really see the pulling power of the arts. Now, you see the 15% is usually a little lower because it's a big state, and all that type of thing. Generally, the communities themselves are a lot higher. La Crosse was 38%, for example. Nationally, 34% was the average. So overall, the communities were pretty much in line. One of the things we found out, though, with the Wisconsin out-of-state attendees, so about 15% of them, a third of those folks actually had an overnight lodging fee, and they averaged $142 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. As we know, when you get that head into bed, well, that's when the cash registers really start ringing. So some really powerful research there. I just want to tell you, so we're doing a new economic impact study. We're doing it statewide. We've got Door County, Milwaukee, Dayton County, Eau Claire, Green Bay, St. Croix. And I hope I didn't miss any communities, but we're in the process of doing this study again now. And a couple things different is, instead of a general local government revenue figure, we're really going to be able to break that down now for the future. So you'll be able to see not just like, oh yeah, it was like $30 million of government revenue across the state. What percentage that was from sales tax? What percentage from property tax? What percentage from lodging taxes? So that's an update. The other thing we're doing is we're really centering equity in Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 in a way that we haven't done before. In the past, our studies have underrepresented BIPOC arts and culture organizations. And so we've taken a lot of ways to adjust that so we can more fully represent the arts across the participating communities across the state. We have about 386 communities in some states that are part of this study this time. It's the biggest ever. And I've got working with a consulting firm to help us with the equity work. We've hired a equity and community engagement director to work with everybody. And we've really just shaken out the whole study. It's been a real transformation. We've reviewed every survey that we do, to scrape out bias and anything like that. Working with our communities to, identify, more places where arts and culture is happening. And so we can more fully represent the community. And that'll also affect, the overall narrative. Again, we'll sort of say, here's what's happening community-wide, or here's what's happening statewide. But then within that, here's an analysis of BIPOC arts and culture community. Because if one of the ways to think of systemic racism is lack of economic opportunity. And if we don't even have a measure to begin with, how are we going to start to address that? So this study will have some important first steps. We're also going to be benchmarking leaders of color who are leading these organizations. And so there's some other great pieces to the study as well. And there's lots more about all that on our website. So that's a little bit about what's to come. All right, that was arts and economic prosperity. Hope everyone's doing okay here. Let's start to move towards some of the workforce and issue people related to the creative economy. And LinkedIn, every year they do some really interesting research because, you know, they've got thousands and thousands of business leaders, HR leaders, you know, to survey and research. And recently, this past year, they published the 2020 Workplace Learning Report. And essentially what they did is they asked about 6,700 HR professionals and managers about the most important soft skills and hard skills that they're looking in their workforce. And for the second year in a row, creativity pops as the #1 soft skill. And you can see at the bottom of this slide how they define it. Soft skills are the essential interpersonal skills that make or break our ability to get things done. We think of them as foundational, and every professional should be working to build them. So basically they say soft skills are about how we're working and how we're working together. Hard skills, as you can see from the list on the right, that's what we're working on. You know, obviously a lot of tech and sales and design and that type of thing. So the importance of creativity in the workplace, and it's what business leaders are looking for. And that's consistent with a report done by the Conference Board. Now, the Conference Board, it's the National Organization for Big Business in this country. You know, it's where the Fortune 1000 CEOs go to for business information. It's, you know, business scholars writing for business leaders. And their research has shown that creativity is now among the top 5 applied skills that business leaders are looking for. In fact, it's leapfrog the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. Of course, they're, you know, as researchers, it's like, well, yeah, of course you got to be able to read, write, do math. But if you could take some creativity and apply that to your scientific knowledge, your coding, your agriculture, your medical research knowledge, those are the high-paying jobs we're all trying to attract to our communities. That's how you create, innovate, and prosper in a global marketplace. And so in this, and again, this is Conference Board's research. And then this is a report that they published. It's called Ready to Innovate. In this study, it shows that 72% of business leaders say creativity is of high importance in hiring. 85% of those folks say we're struggling to find the people we're looking for and identify the people we're looking for. And so in the surveys, they asked them, well, all right, creativity is an important, you know, aspect of what you're looking for. How do you identify a creative worker? How do you know if you got a creative person sitting across the table from you? 2, way at the top, starting your own company, you know, entrepreneurial activity, and study of the arts, especially while in college. And they write in the conclusion of the report, it's clear that the arts, music, drawing, drama, dance, literature, media, provide skills sought by employers of the 3rd millennium. And so we're starting to see, you know, in their, when they interview and when, you know, business leaders do interviews and that type of thing, they're looking for proxies for creativity in the arts, as you'd expect, R1. We used to have a banker on our board, Ken Ferguson, and big tall guys say, well, I'm just a country banker from Altus, Oklahoma. Well, he had a lot of banks. He was chair of the American Bankers Association and everything else. But Ken would say, I would always ask people I interview about their involvement in the arts. Do you attend? Do you engage? Do you create? Because for him, it was a very effective proxy on creativity and problem solving and innovative thinking. Although then he'd say, well, except for my bank tellers, I don't want creative bank tellers, you know, just just everybody else. And this is a big issue because business leaders these days, how do I attract, creative workers to my community and to my business? And so again, back to that research of, HR directors and everything. What they're hearing from people is, prospective candidates, look, you want me to be creative in the workplace, you got it. But I'm a creative person. I want arts and culture and creativity in my community where I live too. I want some arts events to attend, maybe an arts maker space. I've got kids. I want them to get a quality arts education. And so this is in our strategic interest. And so when you talk to business leaders, call out this Ready to Innovate report. It's business scholars doing this research about the importance of creativity. Back to our public opinion survey. In our public opinion survey, we interview over 3,000 people. Just put that in context. Most surveys you read in the newspaper have maybe about 1,000, interviews plus minus, and that's actually good. That's okay. 3,000 people though, we can really dig into the reliability of the data, do some analyses and everything. But we asked the employed people as part of that survey about the importance of creativity in their jobs. And 55% of employed Americans said their jobs require them to be creative. 60% said, you know what, the more creative I am in the workplace, the more successful I am in the workplace. So we're seeing more and more people and recognize in themselves and in their work the importance of creativity. So how does this manifest itself? Well, this happy looking fella a couple of years back got the Nobel Prize for medicine. Thomas Sudoff, he's a Stanford scholar. And the reporters asked him, Professor, who was your most influential teacher? Probably expecting him to say, wistfully, oh, I'll never forget my high school biology teacher, or something like that. No, you know what he said without missing a beat? I owe it all to my bassoon teacher. And he went on to describe how it was his music education that gave him the habits of mind that made him a great scientific researcher, a great medical researcher and scholar. Drive for excellence, the iterative process, doing it again and again, persevering, not just settling for the first possible solution and moving on. And talked about visual thinking and problems identification and problem solving. Now, there's research that shows this may not be like a fluke or an accident. There's just not far from y'all at Michigan State University, there's a scholar named Robert Bernstein, who has studied creativity his whole career. He's MacArthur Genius Award winner and everything. And one of the things he and his team did was study all the Nobel laureates in the sciences, going back to the beginning. And he looked at their level of arts activity and arts engagement and personally and maker and that type of thing. And then he compared them to scientists at two separate scientific societies, one in the US, one in the UK. What did he find? The Nobel laureates 17 times more likely to be actively involved as arts maker, as musician, as painter, as poet. So, there's something there. And that's, there's a great example of why we need to cultivate creativity and why we got to start early. This obviously ties into arts education, which I just think is just one of the most important things we can be focusing on now. I'll give you a snapshot. There's so many research studies about it. Find some you're familiar with and find some students who are benefiting from it, and make sure when you go to testify to your city council, your state legislature, bring those students along with you and have them talk about the importance of arts education to them. But one of my faves is by a scholar at UCLA, James Catterall, and his research was longitudinally over time. And he looked at Department of Education data, 25,000 students at 1,000 schools across the country. big nationally representative sample. And what he did is he divided those students into 4 quartiles, 4 groups based on their level of arts involvement. So up here, practices the violin 3 hours a day. And then, kind of down here, gets to the museum once or twice a year. And then he compared the academic performance of the arts involved versus the least arts involved kids. And these kids, the ones with most arts involvement, better grade point averages, better standardized test scores, lower dropout rates, even better attitudes about community service. Now, because you're all good consumers of research, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, but didn't these kids up here probably come from, more affluent or better educated families, and we'd expect them to do better, right? And so he anticipated that question. And he went back to his base of 25,000 students and looked at the lowest socioeconomic quartile. So basically the students in Title I schools or who live in low-income communities. And then he ran the same, bless you. What he found is that the students, even in that quartile, the arts-involved students were even more likely to be performing better academically than the least arts involved. Suggesting then to researchers, education scholars, boy, maybe the arts help level the playing field or help kids catch up who got a late start. So put that over here for a minute, because I also want to tell you there's some other Department of Education research, which has a real troubling trend. That was really optimistic. This one's troubling. And every 10 years or so, Department of Ed kind of looks at the provision of arts education, broadly described across the country. And, it's been overall fairly stable. It's up somewhere, it's down somewhere else, and, cycles a little bit. But in those low-income school communities and Title I schools, specifically, a huge drop-off in the amount of arts education those kids are getting. So what that means is the kids who stand to benefit the most from arts education, per Catterall's work, are the ones losing it the fastest. And the Secretary of Education at the time called this a civil rights issue, because Catterall, in fact, studied some of the cohort into their 20s as young adults. And even as young adults, you could see there were measurable differences between, the arts involved and the non-arts, less arts involved kids. More likely to have some college going, more likely to be in career-oriented jobs. So, we're talking about the whole trajectory of a young person's future here. So when we talk arts and creative economy, we're talking about helping our kids be more creative, but also just prospering better in their lives. So that's a big one. And then speaking of our communities, I like to talk about this. This is another one in the public opinion study, because, I think a healthy, vibrant community that's connected is a creative community. And we do things together, we work together. And so our public opinion study showed 72% of Americans say the arts unify their community, regardless of age, race, or ethnicity. 73% said the arts help me understand other cultures in my community. And what's fascinating is those are findings that cut across all socioeconomic strata. So it's not an urban phenomenon, it's not an affluence phenomenon. In fact, if you look at the cohort of low-income people of color, the cohort most likely to strongly agree with these personal and community well-being benefits. So a vibrant arts and creative economy is making our communities just healthier in so many ways. Basically, and it's the perfect antidote to the pandemic. The arts get us out of our homes. Where we've been locked up and into a shared public space to have a shared cultural experience. Hey, we're all here to see Hamilton for the 3rd time together or something like that. Nobody cares who you voted for. Nobody cares where you practice your faith. The arts are something we do together. And it's starting to heal some of that isolation and separation from the pandemic, which has had mental health issues. And it's also providing needed income to all those local businesses. So, think about those audience spending data. So a lot of ways that the arts and creative economy are benefiting our communities. So just a couple reminders, about advocacy, because, we got to take action here, to advance the creative economy in Wisconsin. I always love this. A few years back when the economy was taking a bit, somebody asked Senator Tom Udall, who was, at the time was the senator from New Mexico, and he was also co-chair of the Senate Cultural Caucus. How do you, advocate for the arts in this environment? He said, tell every one of your senators about the economic benefits of the arts. So, again, this is, these are messages that resonate. And how do you advocate? It's like, oh, I want to tell the story. I want to do the right thing. I break it down to 3 questions. It can be this simple. What's the message? Who gets the message? And who delivers the message? So we've talked about some great messages today. The arts stimulate the economy. When you grow arts jobs, you will, by extension, grow all jobs across the state. Arts provide local revenue and local business for local merchants. Arts improve the quality and unity of our communities. The arts create healthier communities. So lots of messages. We talked about arts education, and we could, if we had another hour, we'd talk about arts and healthcare and arts and health in the military. And there's, so many ways that the arts benefit our communities. Who gets the message? And that's where you do some of your research. Who are those authorizers in your environment that make decisions about funding? Who's that elected leader? Who's that, Chamber of Commerce or that, decision maker? And what's going to resonate with them? And so that's, as arts and, creative economy advocates, we need a quiver full of case-making arrows. And so, some folks are going to care about jobs, right? So you go to that meeting and you got your numbers ready and you pull out your job arrow and bang, hit them with that first. Some are going to care about, education, and so you hit them with that one first too. And then who delivers the message? And that's us. Now, when they send me up to Capitol Hill to do a congressional briefing or, staff briefing or something, I mean, they see me coming a mile away. Guys hide their wallets, ladies lock their purse in the drawer, because, they know what I'm there for. But when we bring, a business leader or another elected leader from our community, an educator, a school superintendent to talk about how the arts are good for the economy, well, that gets a whole different kind of attention. A few years back, when we make sure there's an arts presence at all the political conventions, every 4 years. And, we had the mayor, and so we were at the RNC, and the mayor from Mesa, Arizona was there. He was telling a story of how it was the budget hearing night for the arts. And, he was up there along with the rest of the city council. And, there were 60 people lined up to do their 3 minutes about the importance of the arts. But he said, what I noticed that evening is that the chief of police was there, which wasn't that unique. But he was in full chief of police regalia, hat, tie, medals. He said that was a little different. That got his attention. After everyone else had spoken, the chief of police asked if he could do 3 minutes. And he got up there and basically said, look, if you got to take a cut out of the arts budget, I'd just rather you took it out of my public safety budget. Because when the arts do their job well, it makes my job as police chief easier. Boy, can you imagine if we had 1,000 police chiefs on that message, mission accomplished. So who else can deliver the message about the value of the arts? And then lastly, got a golden rule in Americans for the Arts: no story without a number and no number without a story. We're the arts and culture. We're all about stories, usually small, but always interesting and personal and impactful, lead with that story, because the story captures the imagination. Tell the story of when you went to an arts event, how you spent all those other dollars, or, the impact of, oh man, if it wasn't for arts education for me, it's what kept me going in school for a while. I mean, I can get into that story too sometime. Tell that story and then deliver the data, because it just shows that compelling story wasn't an accident. This happens thousands or millions of times a day. And actually the numbers in the stories touch different parts of the brain. So, remember both of those. And yours will be an advocacy visit that nobody's going to forget. So we've all got a job to do, because it's so easy to take our work, for people to take our work for granted, and just assume, it's always going to be there, and all the incredible work you do, just it'll always be going. We have to be relentless in our messaging. And this is a picture from 1913 at the Louvre in Paris. Bad news: the Mona Lisa was stolen. Mona Lisa was hanging on these hooks here. It took them 2 years to get it back. But in the 2 years the Mona Lisa was missing, more people went to see where the picture had been hanging, you know where this is going, than saw the painting itself in the previous 14 years. So we can't let folks take any of this for granted. We have to be out there constantly building relationships with these legislators and decision makers, talking about the importance of arts and creative economy in our community, in our family, and across the state. Everything you do to advance arts, culture, and creative economy is important. You're important for doing it. Thanks very much. And that's my email there. And again, I'm going to make those 2 little slide fixes, and then I'll send this to Ann and George, and they'll make it all available to you. I'm going to stop sharing and say hi to everybody. Now we're all back on the screen, and if there's questions,
comments, you can either put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. And Karen, you are up.
Hey, Karen. Oh, let's see. I didn't get there. Might be easier just to ask it. Hey, Karen, good to see you.
You, good to see you too. Thank you for doing this. Yeah, just love the black hole of goodness that made me laugh out loud in a dark sort of way. But wondering, as we look at jobs in a sort of a different way right now, with the labor market being what it is in some sectors, are you still finding in your work that jobs still resonate at the highest, or are there other things, especially given the pandemic wrinkles right now and those reverbs, that you're hearing?
Yes. I think it's, yes, jobs just resonates in a huge way. I mean, if somebody had, the thing that killed the pandemic, or COVID or something like that, I guess everybody, would rally with, behind that. But honestly, if I were some extraterrestrial from outer space, and I came here to planet Earth to advocate for arts, and I'd say, take me to your leader. Oh yeah, give me one talking point. I'd say, give me the jobs one. But there's other research now that shows, mental health has become a huge issue. George made mention, I'll just mention this, and I'll send this around along with the PowerPoint. Okay, what's he talking about? So that's 10 reasons to support the arts. And one of the reasons is the arts improve mental health. In any given year, about 11% of the population is measured by the Census Bureau is having some kind of mental health issue, and during the pandemic, that got up closer to 40% of the population saying, anxiety, depression, that type of thing. So we've been doing research with the University of Florida and University College London. It's been an international study looking at the role of arts and culture, and sort of arts broadly, arts, culture, arts making, gardening, sort of creative, expressive pursuits on mental health. And basically, for people who have some practice every day in that, they see lower rates of depression, lower rates of anxiety, and increased levels of life satisfaction. So that's a pretty important one right now as well. But you need that quiver full of all those arrows. You got to be able to talk about arts, quality of life, community unity, arts education, healthcare, jobs, the economy. But yeah, everyone's worried about the economy. And boy, and especially now in inflation and everything else.
Hey, Randy, ready to innovate. Is there any thought about updating that? Have you heard anything from the conference board on that?
Yeah, we are continue to work with the conference board on different studies and business committee, business investment in the arts. Yes, we've been talking about it, and sort of like the next level would be a much bigger, deeper type of investigation. And so I think right now everyone's like, boy, it'd be great to get to that next level that really shows and quantifies that, how the arts are indeed making workers, more creative, more innovative, some more granular type of evidence there. But it's expensive, everyone's trying to figure out how to pay for it. So, but there's interest in doing it.
That's great. One of my favorite parts of that study is where they talk about the difference between the CEO and the school superintendent, and where the superintendent is teaching kids to do critical thinking and creative problem solving. The CEOs want problem identification.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're passing each other like this. And it was a great thing to note to people. And I still think it's a very important concept to say that we got to identify the problem before we can solve it.
Yeah, well, and just for everyone's understanding, so if you just Google that, it's on our website, but just Google, Ready to Innovate, you'll find that report. One of the other fascinating items you remind me of, George, is that the many different ways people define creativity. The cognitive psychologists define it this way. Some people define it as problem identification, others as problem solving. Others is ability to deal with ambiguity and multiple solutions. I mean, I think it's all of that, but it's interesting to see that ranked as well. It's a great recollection from the study.
Yeah.
Trying to undo the silos that we seem to exist in as much as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things, there's kind of a still to come later this year, is it's great to have the BEA data at the federal level and at the state level. I'm in the process of creating county level arts and creative economy reports using the federal NAICS data and standard occupational data. There's 3,143 counties in the United States. This is going to be like a 12-page standardized report for every single county. It'll be like free and available on the website. But basically, how many arts and creative economy business establishments there are in each county. Again, that's nonprofit and commercial and everything. How many people they employ, their total revenues, and then also look at artists in that at the county level who work independently or for a non-arts organization. Because remember, a law firm has got a graphic artist, and all that type of thing, or an insurance company might employ an artist. So artists work, all across the sector, automobile design, everything else. And so, but I got a couple more months on that, but that's something that will be free and available, and then I'll start updating annually.
That is cool, Randy. That will be very useful information for us on the ground.
You heard it here first.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and it's recorded.
That's right. So now you really have to do it.
I'm on the hook.
But we're going to definitely follow up with that so that we can get that information and get it out to people, because the more local, the better. And I just want to say that, no story without data and no data without story. That's the stories and the data make a very powerful argument. And that's what we're all saying. So, and that's what we know to be true. So. Okay, it's the hour being 11:02. If there's any other questions, George, type your email in the chat box.
I shall do so.
And here's mine so that you can find us, send us some messages. We have your information, and we will follow up with Randy's presentation and links to the research and all sorts of other goodies. So Randy, thank you. I'm sorry you can't be here with us, although you're happy to have missed the snow yesterday.
Yeah, that's true. But I
we
look forward to my next visit back. And,
in
and
the
it's great.
summer.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well,
when
we
we
always
do
love-
Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, and that releases later next year, definitely be back.
Right,
Into
that
your
will be the
communities.
statewide, that will be a great statewide tour. And we thank you for your work and your heart on behalf of the arts, and enjoy the spring, and we'll keep talking.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you all
Now
for
you
being
know.
with us.
Now you know why we call him the great Randy Cohen.
That's right.
Take care,
Thanks
Randy.
all.
All right. Good to see
Bye-bye.
y'all.